Hi there. Welcome to another edition of the Wayrider Chronicles, the alternative conversation channel. My name is Kim.
Hi everybody. The subject of this chronicle today is going to be banking in Switzerland. Before going deeper into the current state of banking in Switzerland, I would like to talk about KYCs. What? KYCs. Know your client. Know your client regulations or forms are part and parcel of what is required by the account opening officer for a bank when you walk into the bank or even go online and attempt to open a new bank account. What does it mean, know your client? It's been standardized into a series of questions or demands by the bank that have to be met before they will even consider opening your bank account. Doesn't matter if you've got millions of dollars or francs or whatever, they will not open a bank account for you unless you fulfill these demands or these requests for information about you. Why did this all come about? 9/11. Let's blame 9/11. Blame 9/11 for lots of things to do with banking. Before, essentially, let's not go into too much detail. Essentially, before the terrorist attacks on America and the famous 9/11 attacks, it was relatively easy for anybody to walk into a bank in any country in the world and open a bank account. To their horror, the Americans discovered after 9/11 that most of the funding that was behind the terrorist attacks, because all those airplanes that crashed into World Trade Center and elsewhere, there was a huge logistic scenario behind that, funding the operatives who did it over probably at least a couple of years, and that all cost money. So one of the reactions was that, well, let's make it more difficult for people unknown, basically terrorists in this case, to open bank accounts. So regulations were put in place that required people to prove who they were and also to try to get a handle on suspicious payments. One of the consequences of that is, for example, that payments over normally around about $10,000 between banks is flagged. Flagged in the sense, what does that mean? That a report of that goes off to the management, and the management, or sometimes in some cases directly to government officials, and they check it out to make sure that it's legitimate. One of the unintended consequences of these new regulations has made it extremely difficult for legitimate people to open, or legitimate citizens, should we say, to open bank accounts. And in some cases, legitimate citizens of various countries have had their bank accounts closed. As some people will remember, last year in the UK, there were a number of scandals, notably with the Mr. Brexit, Nigel Farage, who had his account closed with a banking institution in the UK, and because, well, we won't go into all the details, there was suspicious activity. Happens all the time. Don't believe that's some politically motivated bank closure. It happens all the time. there are numerous cases of people who are going perfectly normally about their banking business and suddenly receive a letter from a bank saying, we're going to close your account. The bank, and this has happened not only in Switzerland and in the UK, but also in America. A lot of cases in America where people suddenly receive a letter saying, we're closing your account. We can blame the systems that are in place, we can blame suspicious transactions or incompetence by the officials monitoring banking transactions, but it happens. So fast forwarding to Switzerland today, where I have, after 20-year absence, become a resident in the last couple of years, it has become extremely difficult as a newly arrived resident to open a bank account. A, because of these KYC regulations. B, because Switzerland went through the ringer as far as, and again, consequence of 9/11, as far as banking secrecy was concerned, to make sure that terrorist money, essentially, and of course, money from the drug and other illegal activities, or let's just call them illegal activities, was not flowing into Switzerland. Of course, as we all know, there's ways and reasons around that, but on the whole, this doesn't happen anymore, or it's become much more difficult. What it means is that, so we've got three scenarios. We've got the two scenarios or two consequences, what I call the law of unintended consequences. The clampdown by successive American administrations putting laws in place to make it more difficult to open bank accounts, and these bank accounts are being monitored. Here in Switzerland, we have a second problem, or not a law of unintended. Here in Switzerland, we have a second. Here in Switzerland, we have a second of those laws of unintended consequences, namely the clampdown by yet more American administrations to break the Swiss banking secrecy laws. And at the same time, we've had a consolidation in banking sector in Switzerland. When I first moved here at the beginning of the 80s, there were 5 or 6 major Swiss banks. Through mergers, disasters, acquisitions, etc., there is now only one, UBS. So what, you may say? You have one big Swiss bank. Well, it's not a good thing, as we know. As everybody knows, having one major institution that effectively is the largest in the country is generally known as a monopoly, which means that what does monopoly mean? A monopoly is a business that is a business within a particular sector that can do what it wants and can charge what it wants. Yes, there are other banks in Switzerland, each state, as they would call it in America, but each canton has its own cantonal bank. But they're not quite the same. They don't have the scale, and most businesses would have or did prefer to have their accounts with one of the major Swiss banks. So what does it mean? There are two paths off from this monopoly situation, which I can talk about personally. The first one is that when I came back here 2.5 years ago, it was nearly impossible to open a normal Swiss bank account with one, at that time, one of the two remaining major Swiss banks, and even with the second tier Swiss banks, and the post office also has a bank here, also extremely difficult, because I had been away 20 years and there's no records of me. Who are you? However, into the gap stepped the Fintechs, and I can count on one hand, or there's about 5 of them, sorry, count on one hand, 5 fingers. There are approximately 5 or at least 3 major online banks where, as long as you've got the basic basis of those KYCs, residence permit, ID, etc., you open a bank account within 24 hours without any problems and without having to invest vast sums of money with that particular bank. The next part is and what is, because the collapse of Credit Suisse and the emergence of UBS as the last remaining large Swiss bank has meant that, not so much for individuals, because that's a different aspect of banking. It has meant that, besides fund management, we're not talking about assets under management, all these foreigners who place, or not only foreigners, but Swiss people who are placing millions and billions of Swiss francs under management in for portfolio management and pension funds, etc. No, we're talking about businesses, because there is a lot of innovation in Switzerland for businesses across a range of business sectors, of which I think AI will only accelerate this type of business development. But they have the same problem. They also have KYC problems, and they've only got one bank to do it with as a business bank. Well, besides the second tier banks, of which there are probably 4 or 5, and the cantonal banks. But essentially, it's extremely difficult. I know from talking to a number of business people here in Switzerland, it's extremely difficult for new startup businesses to open bank accounts. This deficit is being addressed. More fintech, what we mean by fintech, means that financial technology, the same as the online banking for private, is now being developed for businesses. But the interesting thing is that we have one remaining Swiss bank, and if UBS is not careful, they will find themselves devolving into nothing more than a large asset manager. And I would hesitate to say that there has been people saying, and then there were none. I mean, from 6, 7 major Swiss banks to none. Probably not. But as a universal bank, for where you can walk in and open a bank account, which I did when I first came here, walked into UBS, you open a bank account, you open a bank account. Give you $100, 100 Swiss francs, they would open a bank account for you. That type of bank, what we call a universal bank, as an entity, as UBS as an entity, I think is slowly disappearing. If it becomes a large, what we call asset or pension fund management company, so be it. But one day you may turn around in the next 10 to, let's say 5 to 10 years and say, it's not a bank anymore. That's the Way Rider Chronicles. See you guys.